for people like yourself who have both these tendencies, right, left brain tendencies, if you feel like it's a binary choice, you have to pick either the creative or the logical or the rational side of yourself. But it really seems like you've found or figured out a way to marry both, essentially.
There is this kind of tension between what you are on the inside and what you are on the outside professionally, and whether you have to make a choice between two different things or if you can blend it together. And I think that leads to a lot of satisfaction when people get it right. And I think it leads to sort of lifelong, I wish I had done this, or I wish I could go back and do that, if you kind of ignore the other part of yourself.
Welcome to another episode, another edition of the Video Craft Show presented by Video Husky. I am your host, John Santiago, and each week it is my job, as always, to talk to and deconstruct the experiences, stories, and strategies of content creators who've built online audiences primarily through video. And this week on the show, I speak to someone who has built an audience while essentially doing YouTube on the side. Now, by trade, David Hinden is a surgeon based in the San Francisco Bay Area. He's currently a fellow in the Surgical Critical Care program at Stanford University School of Medicine. But on the side, David also makes time to explore his creativity. And one of his most successful creative endeavors has been his YouTube channel, where he shares content around experiences in medicine, as well as deep dives into the history of medicine these days. To date, David's channel has amassed more than 30,000 subscribers. And in this conversation on the Video Craft Show presented by Video Husky, David joins me to discuss a host of topics, including why it's valuable to have both creative and rational pursuits in your life, the importance of writing in his video creation process, and how he's learned to concede creative control over to a video editor, and so much more. You're going to enjoy this conversation. I certainly did, because it was a conversation with somebody who isn't necessarily at this moment pursuing YouTube from a purely business standpoint. Obviously, he has the resources to afford to work with an editor, considering, he is a surgeon. But I think this is a great conversation for all of you to hear, just to get back down to basics and to the core of what it is that you do as creators. And that is following your curiosities and being creative. I think so often, especially when business is tied up to content creation, you kind of lose sight. You kind of lose joy in just making things for the sake of making it. That's not something that you want to lose, because eventually over time that can hurt you later on in the future, especially if you have built a business around your content. So this serves as a reminder for all of you out there who maybe are losing a little bit of spark when it comes to your content, to listen to this particular episode. So without further ado, let's go ahead and toss it to my conversation with Dr. David Hinden. David Hinden, Dr. David Hinden, thank you for joining me on this edition of the Video Craft Show presented by Video Husky. It is a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited to chat with you because, feel free to, I guess, poke holes in the way that I take this conversation, but I'm very interested to chat with you because, as I alluded to in the introduction, you are a doctor, you're a general surgeon by day, and then you are also doing YouTube essentially as a side creative outlet for yourself. Would that be a fair assessment to make?
I think so. Professionally, I'm now in an extra year, so I actually left my surgical practice to go back to a year of fellowship. So right now I'm moonlighting as a trauma surgeon, and I'm in a surgical critical care fellowship until August. And then when I finish, I'll be a combination of ICU surgeon, trauma surgeon, and general surgeon.
Okay, wow. Yeah, and we're both actually, at the moment, we're both based in the Bay Area. You're out there in Palo Alto, correct?
That's right, I am, yeah.
Yes, because your fellowship is at Stanford.
It is, yes.
How did you end up landing that? Obviously, Stanford is a very prestigious university in so many different aspects. I'm curious how you ended up at Stanford, and were there other opportunities that you looked at around the country that offered a similar type of fellowship?
Oh, sure. Well, so Stanford's a really special place from an innovation perspective, and the reason that I'm here now started even before the fellowship. So I finished my training in general surgery in 2019, And I did the kind of unconventional maneuver after finishing training of entering this sort of academic fellowship at Stanford for something called biodesign, where Stanford has basically said as an institution, hey, we've got a pretty good track record with startups. We think that we are going to put together sort of this method for creating innovation beyond just saying, hey, this seems like a good idea. And it's specific to the health technology space. So I finished my surgical training, came out to Stanford to do that fellowship, did some moonlighting on the side as a general surgeon, but that's how I originally came to Stanford. And then when I was looking at critical care fellowships, I really wanted to stay at Stanford if at all possible, in large part because it would sort of keep me under the same umbrella and keep me in that institution where I could stay involved with all of that.
So the biodesign fellowship, a lot of that has to do with technological innovation and building new technology for the healthcare industry, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, cool. And then the critical care fellowship that you're a part of, tell me more about that and what the specific focus is. As someone here who is, I mean, my mom was a nurse for the longest time. She just retired last year, so I have sparing knowledge. Yeah, thank you. Sparing knowledge of the medical field. I have a good friend of mine who is actually a doctor in North Carolina, at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. But all of these things are so foreign to me, but I'm always very curious about it.
Oh, sure. Well, the way I think of critical care is like if you're looking at a hospital in general, you can have patients sort of in what we call floor beds, where they've got a roommate and, there's, a nurse taking care of a couple rooms and patients come in and out. They get their vital signs checked maybe every couple hours, that type of thing. For patients who are really sick, who maybe they're hooked up to a breathing machine, or they're what we'd consider unstable, like their blood pressures are really not doing well and they need close monitoring, anything like that, anything where you think someone might have a cardiac arrest, they're usually in a special part of the hospital called an ICU, an intensive care unit. And there are some small hospitals that have just a general ICU for all types of patients. And then there are some hospitals, especially bigger hospitals, will have ICUs for surgical patients and ICUs for medical patients. So right now I'm in a year of additional training where I'm really kind of going deep in the care of the surgical patient in ICU, and getting a lot of extra sort of intensive training on specific procedures that they need, things that need to be considered when you're managing them, stuff like that.
Very interesting. I'm curious, how much of your inspiration, maybe if any, to take part in this fellowship has to do with just the pandemic over the last year? Obviously, there's so many people due to COVID in critical care and ICU. Was that something that inspired you at all to maybe take that leap into that fellowship?
Well, by the time the pandemic really started to rear its head, I had kind of committed myself in the back of my mind that this was the pathway that I wanted to be on. But I will say that the sort of the specter of the pandemic has really kind of added its own flavor to everything. So yeah, the pandemic has created a whole new genre of patients that we take care of in the ICU for sure. It has added to what we understand about how to manage that type of patient. And also from the whole innovation perspective, it's created all sorts of new, we think of sort of the kernel of an invention being like the unmet need. So what is like the core at the very heart of something and that needs to be solved that sort of leads to this massive company down the line. And certainly there's a ton of unmet needs that sort of sprang forth from the pandemic.
Gotcha. Cool. Very interesting there. I want to dial back, to just how you got into medicine. Part of this podcast and what I like to do is deconstruct, how people got to where they are. And obviously a lot of content creators that I interview, like yourself, they are either doing content creation on the side, they're moonlighting, or it's a part of their business. But for you, I'm really curious about just how you got into not necessarily content creation yet, but how you decided to go into medicine. In doing some research for this conversation, I I had found out that you were quite inspired by, your pediatrician growing up, and that originally you wanted to become a pediatrician, and then you ultimately went down the route of being a surgeon.
Yeah, very, very impressive research. I've always been someone with, left brain, right brain parts of my life. So, in college, I split my majors. I majored in molecular bio, and I majored in English. And my whole life had been trying to sort of marry those two parts of who I am. And I ended up landing on medicine because science, obviously I like science, and, I like working with people. And even though at the front it didn't necessarily satisfy all the creative parts of who I was, back when I was, picking career stuff, I liked the fact that medicine sort of blended science with being able to interact with people and care with people and sort of have that human touch, while also sort of going deep into all of the nerdy world of physiology and science and how things work and all of that.
Interesting. I always wonder too if it's for people like yourself who have both these tendencies, right, left brain tendencies, if it's difficult to make that decision, or if you feel like it's a binary choice. You have to pick either the creative or the logical or the rational side of yourself. But it really seems like you've found or figured out a way to marry both, essentially.
I think that is such a great. I'm sure we'll get into this later when we're talking today, but I think you really hit the nail on the head that there is this kind of tension between what you are on the inside and what you are on the outside professionally, and whether you have to make a choice between two different things or if you can blend it together. And I think that leads to a lot of satisfaction when people get it right, and I think it leads to sort of lifelong, I wish I had done this, or I wish I could go back and do that, if you kind of ignore the other part of yourself. So, right now I think my YouTube journey and a lot of what I'm doing in life in general is trying to do my best to satisfy both of those itches. But, that's such an interesting tension that you kind of brought up.
Was there anybody in your life early on who was maybe, a role model for you when it came to creativity, or was creativity just something that has always been ingrained in yourself?
I think it's I had incredible role models and still have incredible role models. I think in terms of role models influencing my professional career, my two parents, my dad was an anesthesiologist. He's retired now. My mom was an English professor, and I think sort of being in a home with them and sort of growing up and sort of having their two ways of thinking around me, I think that probably helped blend, and helped sort of keep me interested in those two different parts of the world. I think in terms of creative role models, I think there have been so many, like on YouTube, and I grew up playing violin, so I had, musician role models. And I think really having the encouragement from my parents growing up to sort of pursue things that interested me was really the common theme with everything.
Wow, that's really fascinating. So that's how it kind of makes more sense to me as to how you end up double majoring in biology and English in undergrad. Because those are typically subjects that you don't normally see people double major in. They're very difficult because writing is a very hard, creative endeavor in itself.
I lucked out that there were I think there are probably more people that would like to do a little bit of both, and usually the credits don't work out in college. And I lucked out that the program I was in, I was able to sort of get enough credits from the two different sides. I was in a great place for college, and I lucked out that they had this. So I was at Penn in Philadelphia, and they had this building called the Writers' House, where anyone could kind of just, you didn't have to, be a card-carrying English major or anything. That you could just show up during the day and grab a seat and hang out on the couches, and like throughout the days and the evenings there'd be readings and poetry readings and workshops, and it was this real hub for people on campus. So I think it wasn't super common to do English and bio, but there was definitely like a cohort of us in my graduating class that were doing some sort of flavor of English major and some sort of flavor of science major. And they really made it possible to do that, and kind of made it a really fertile space for all of that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's such a crucial skill to have. Like, if you can write well, even as a doctor, I mean, there's so many things I imagine that you're writing on a daily basis. Not necessarily, maybe you're not writing long essays, but perhaps you're down the line, you're publishing journals or anything like that. And writing is a platform or a way for you to clarify your thinking. Is that something that you've always found to be the case for yourself when it comes to writing?
Yeah, that's such a great way of putting it. I think it's a way to clarify your thinking. I think it's a way that so in your own brain, it's a way to sort of organize your thoughts, and it's a way to sort of communicate with the world and present yourself and sort of present your ideas in a way that are digestible for other people. Mm-hmm. And, it's also kind of like clothing. And, when someone sees you a block away and sees what you're wearing and doesn't know you, they make a quick impression of who you are and what you believe and where you're from. And a lot of ways your written word is kind of like that. People will form biases about you and who you are and what your intelligence is just by looking at a sentence that you've written. So for better or worse, I think it's part of the dynamic of why it's important to be able to write effectively.
Tell me too about the experience of going to med school, because I personally feel that a lot of school these days, the usefulness of it is just being able to weed out the people who aren't necessarily as serious about something, right? Like, if you can get through medical school, because it's a challenge, it's not easy. Same thing with if you were to go and pursue law school and become a lawyer, to go through that regimen of going through the program is a way to weed out, I guess, the people who aren't as committed to those fields. So tell me a bit about that experience for yourself, and if there were any ways that, going to med school, what things have translated to, I guess, your work, in terms of exploring your creativity as a YouTuber.
Oh, interesting. Well, I from a more sober part of the answer, I did not enjoy medical school. I did well enough to sort of get where I wanted to be professionally, but I loved college. I loved the time and space to sort of pursue things intellectually and follow your curiosity. And obviously I did all the pre-med stuff in college to get myself to med school. And so those classes were, they could be tough and time intensive, but still, like in college, you can find yourself with a roommate talking till 3 a.m. about, the meaning of life. And med school just was not like that. I think, I agree. I think there's, when you say, it can serve as a way to weed people out, and I can't think of anyone in my medical school starting class that dropped out. Maybe there's one that I'm forgetting, but it was a lot of stress, and it didn't always feel like there was the time and space to enjoy or digest or sort of savor what you were learning. You just had to kind of, in the classroom parts of med school, you had to just kind of memorize and get through information. And then in terms of how it sort of influenced my career, I think this is going to sound dramatic, but just the way that people who have suffered, I think, have a different way of seeing the world. I think going through med school and being the med student in a rotation where every month you're in a different rotation, you always feel like the odd one out that doesn't know anything. I think it really, in my shoes at least, gave me a kind of sensitivity to what junior residents and med students are going through now that I'm more senior. Because it's tough. And I think a lot of people from the outside, or people who are real senior who've been in the profession for decades, they can forget just how difficult it is sort of coming up through the ranks. In terms of the second part of your question, you would ask how it influenced my creative journey, I think. Was that?
Yeah.
I think as you start to get deeper into medicine, there is less and less space to continue the parts of you that made you non-medical. And I think it kind of forced me to clarify that I still wanted to be creative. I certainly took a big break between college and when I started my YouTube channel halfway through residency, and I wasn't doing a whole lot of creative stuff, but I think it at least helped me hang on to the fact that I didn't want to give that up totally, and I wanted to get back into it.
Yeah. It's interesting to me, David, because there's so many, some of the my favorite books, for example, that I've read in recent years were written by doctors. I read,
really?
I don't know if you've read Being Mortal. I think Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. I love that book. It's a book about, the reality of, finality of life and dying, and when breath becomes air by, what was Dr. Paul Kalanithi. He passed away. I think he was also at Stanford too, but he passed away from cancer. He was a neurosurgeon. Yeah. And it's part of me is a little bit jealous when I see people like yourself who you're so bright. You were able to go through the rigors of medical school, and then at the same time you have this penchant for creativity. And it's like, for some of us mere mortals, sometimes I feel like a mere mortal where I'm like, I can only be creative. I'm not that good at I'm not as good as at the higher brow intelligent stuff from time to time, but it's interesting and it's inspiring. I think to a lot of people, and probably to a lot of, younger med students as well, to show that they can have, diverse interests, that they don't, as I alluded to earlier, that there doesn't have to be this like binary choice between, hey, this is who you are. You're a doctor, you're in medicine. You can't explore any of these other things. Because do you find that is the case in your profession, where there are a lot of people who, they latch onto that identity of, I am a doctor and this is all I am?
I think I do. And by the way, I'm sure you could certainly be a doctor if you want. I mean, there's nothing special. It's just time and, thank you for saying that. I think there's this really interesting dynamic when you mentioned the sense of people latching on to the identity of being a doctor. And that kind of touches on like what I try not to be on YouTube and in my creative space, because some of the folks out who are creating content in medicine, creating content of the genre where I'd say, I don't want to say doctor porn, but you'll have to bleep that out. But hey, look at me, I'm wearing scrubs, or like I spent so much time doing this so many years and now I get to be a doctor, or, my 10-year-old self would be so in awe of who I've become. And I think, an ounce of that every once in a while is fine. But I think when that becomes the entire essence of someone's voice, to me, I find that a little boring, but I also find it really depressing to imagine, making that my sort of persona, just sort of talking about that same stuff. And I do think that there are folks in medicine and all sorts of professional careers who have this other part of them that feels kind of silenced. I outwardly, I think when I started residency, I don't think people saw me as like the kind of weird guy that was interested in this other stuff. And as I kind of went through the ranks and I started finding my footing and I started finding these opportunities like on YouTube, the innovation space, I noticed that some really senior surgeons kind of didn't get it. Like, when I decided to do biodesign and I got accepted in the program, I got lots of congratulations. But I remember one surgeon I was operating with said, like, I really don't get why you wouldn't just want to operate as much as you can after you finish residency. Like, what? And I could tell he felt sorry for me. Like I think to him, I was kind of like the equivalent of someone who like couldn't make it or wasn't making it. And, this is kind of a roundabout answer, but I think that is the minority. And I think that more and more people who I meet that aren't doing innovation stuff but are in medicine will come up to me and say, man, how do you get involved in that? Or like, how do I do that? Or, I wish I could be more creative, or I always used to like to draw or play instruments or do all this stuff before medicine. And I think that there's this huge population of people who have this itch to do more and just haven't figured out how to kind of crack the surface and bring that out into their life, along with traditional medicine.
Right. Yeah. And I think also too, speaking as somebody who is obviously, I've been a patient, I have, of a medical practitioner, of doctors and whatnot. I think, when we get the sense that if we can get a better sense of your humanity, that this isn't all you do, it also gives us, I think, from a patient's perspective, an understanding that, hey, we shouldn't be putting these people ultimately on this untouchable pedestal. Like they're human beings too, you know, because I think being in medicine and being a doctor is one of those professions where it's almost like you're viewed, you know, for lack of better terms here, as like a god, because you know, life and death is really in your hands. I mean, literally, with what you do as a surgeon, life and death is literally in your hands. And sometimes we, as people, tend to forget that you're also just people too, prone to making the same mistakes that we do, to having, you know, to facing the same kind of challenges and obstacles. That's one of the things I enjoyed about watching some of your older vlogs too, of just seeing you and your colleagues just acting like normal people, you know. Like I have the experience, you know, of my friend, my good friend, who again I mentioned earlier is a doctor in North Carolina. I know him. I've known him since we were kids, since we were 12 years old. So I'm able to see that part of him. But I'm sure that, you know, a lot of his patients now, and he's a pediatrician himself, but a lot of people that he works with, or, you know, the people who are under his care, probably see him in this like untouchable light. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. I also think being more human and allowing yourself to be more human is another new trend that I think is important to bring into medicine. You know, I'm thinking of when I was in med school, they I don't even remember what they called it, like pods or something. We had a whole medical school class, and then they would break us up into groups of maybe 12, 15 of us that would meet with a senior faculty member once, I think it was like once a week or something, every week for the first year and a half until we're in the clinics. And then after that, they would kind of, we'd meet, you know, once a semester or something. And it was to sort of learn, they were kind of there to mentor us. But I remember one of the faculty members was this really, really senior doctor who was telling us this. I think, you know, he was probably 60 at the time, and he was telling us this story of a pediatric patient who had passed away. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about this fellow of his who had been very involved in this young child's care, who was weeping, and, you know, went to hug the parents and wept. And he told us this story. It was shameful to him that this doctor had behaved, you know, had dropped the veneer and had sort of wept openly in front of it. And he was telling us the story in terms of, like, you know, he was kind of shocked that she had behaved that way. But yeah. I feel like now it's more accepted, and I think, frankly, it's helpful for families and patients to know that we care and to see that there's, you know, we're not just robots.
Yeah, because it doesn't, you know, I mean, I think that there is, and this is something I remember from reading Dr. Gawande's book, is that the way medicine is practiced today is just, it is so clinical, like, you know, diagnosis here, let's write this up, let's write up this prescription here, go take it, call me in a few days if you're not feeling well. It's all, I mean, and that probably has to do, at least here in the States, with the way healthcare has to do with maybe not to get too political or philosophical here, but just on our like consumerist society, where it's just like, come in, you know, you essentially, like, the doctor just takes your orders and then, you know, they fulfill what you need, and then you're in and out, you know, just like going to the grocery store or something like that. And I don't know, I mean, I guess that is something that, you know, hopefully can change with what's happening now. And maybe part of what's allowing it to change is just social media and allowing an outlet for people like yourself, doctors like yourself, to have creative space to show other sides to yourself. So with that said, now I want to ask you about, where does video enter the picture for you? I mean, were you somebody that was dabbling with filmmaking even before you got on YouTube? Was this something that you were doing as a teenager or in college or anything like that?
I wasn't, but had I been exposed to it, I think I would have. So I was making, you know, mixtapes and, you know, CDs and playlists and all of that stuff. And then when I finally discovered video, it was like that on steroids. I mean, the pleasure of picking the perfect song for a video and, you know, mixing it in, and how, you know, it's like trying on a different outfit. You know, you swap off one song and you put something else, and it makes the whole clip feel different. So short answer, no, I didn't do it in college or sooner, but had I played around with it, I think I would have fallen in love with it. And I started making videos when I saw, I saw a Casey Neistat video, and this is probably the most cliched thing I'm going to say, but I just, I still remember I'd seen some link somewhere to watch a video of his, and it wasn't like one of his more viral ones. It was just like a vlog or something. And he was in that famous studio of his and was grabbing some gear to walk out the door, and he must have dropped something, or he cursed. And right as he cursed, the screen cut, the music started. It was just like, it was such perfect timing and pacing and editing that it caught me by surprise. And I was like, this is so interesting. Mm-hmm. It sounds silly saying it right now, but I think just seeing a really good edit and a really good cut, can sort of catch you off guard. And after that, I probably binged on, a couple dozen episodes of his, and not too long after, I was into playing around with video and making videos.
So aside from Casey, were you a big consumer of YouTube content before, or like what drew you to YouTube initially anyways? Was it the cat videos? No, it had to have been the cat videos initially.
It had to be. Yeah. I mean, I think before that was like my first time really getting into being like a heavy consumer of YouTube. Mm-hmm. I think before that, I would see a video somewhere, someone would, send me a link. I'd watch a couple of videos on YouTube and then get on with my day. But, from the moment that I started watching his videos, I think I no longer, when I have downtime ever since, we'll just browse through TV, maybe if there's something on Netflix. But from that moment on, my content consumption has been YouTube. And so, there are all sorts of creators that I get inspired by, that I like to watch and everything. But it sounds crazy, but I really think it started when I found his channel and I got so fascinated by what he was doing and started sort of exploring from there.
So when was that around? Was that around like mid 2010s or something like that? And then after, how long did it take after watching his videos for you to just say, hey, you know what, I'm going to start filming some stuff myself and posting it and dabbling around with video editing and video creation myself?
Yeah, I wish it were mid 2010. It was mid 2016, maybe early 2016, and I was in this sort of brief lull in residence. So in surgical training in the U.S., you have to do 5 years of clinical training. Mm-hmm. And most of the bigger programs make that 7 years, in which you do 2 or 3 years up front and then 2 years of research in a lab, and then your other chunk of that 5. So it's like a 5+2. I found, YouTube and discovered Casey Neistat's videos when I was at the tail end of my 2 years in the lab. And literally when you go into the lab, you switch from getting up at 5 a.m. and being at the hospital and rounding by 6 a.m. You switch from that one day to you don't have anywhere that you have to be until 10 a.m. All of a sudden, it's literally like the difference between a Monday and a Tuesday.
Yeah.
Because I remember I started my lab years like midweek, and I literally like rolled my alarm clock back. So I discovered all this when I was at the tail end of my lab time, and so I was frantically trying to make something of my time before it ran out. Now that I had discovered this new medium, so I started making some little rinky-dink itsy videos on YouTube. I think my oldest videos on my channel are silly travel vlogs. There's 2 minutes of just music and cuts and everything.
I saw a couple of those, like some of your travel vlogs. Did you go to China and you had a travel vlog in Indiana for a wedding or something?
Oh yeah, I went to a wedding in Indiana, and I'd gone to Tokyo. Maybe that's, I'd gone to a Chinese lantern festival. It was in Philadelphia where it was.
Oh, okay.
But it looked like, they were kind of random, but that's when I started making videos, and that's why I started all of a sudden right after I found YouTube stuff.
Interesting. So then from there, I mean, how did you decide to, I guess, pivot your content in the direction where it was, I mean, you're not doing heavy hitting, super hard hitting medical content. But was there a moment or anything like that made you say, okay, this is my area, this is my lane, this is where I'm going to focus?
I think I'm still trying to find that lane. I think from the beginning, when I even the vlogs that I made at the hospital that really performed well and are still probably some of my better performing videos, those were never really where I wanted to be, in terms of my voice in my home creatively on YouTube. Like I really, outside of medicine, when I'm working with companies, I do consulting in different fashions for companies, like for innovation type things. And I always am trying to be someone who happens to be a doctor who is doing innovation and creativity, not someone who is the doctor guy that says, here's what doctors think, and because that's boring and that's super replaceable and anyone can be that. And I think bringing your creative self and a creative voice and spirit to something is much more unique to you. So what I've always been trying to do on YouTube, even as I'm still trying to find my true space, has been trying to excite people from a creative perspective and sort of scratch that itch that folks have who are interested in creativity and innovation with a medical lens over it, I guess.
Okay. As a creator, I'm curious too. Do you find yourself ever dealing with the idea of imposter syndrome? This is something that I often hear from quite a few people who are making stuff online, is wondering is this good enough? Should I actually post this? Should I actually hit publish here? I imagine that in your day job as a surgeon that you're a confident person, because again, life and death is in your hands. But I'm wondering if that is something that you find translates well over into what you're doing as a content creator.
I definitely feel it. And I think to be a surgeon, you have to have enough confidence that you can function and be effective. But I certainly have those imposter feelings in surgery too. And in medicine, I think, especially when you kind of first come out of training, you're with these seasoned experts who have been doing this for decades, and you're kind of thrown into the boiling pot with the same surgeons, but you're kind of like the new guy trying to start to build your career and everything. So I feel it in both, I think. And an interesting twist of those two dynamics is that when you are a doctor on, social media, YouTube, whatever, it elevates you in a way that you might not want to be elevated or feel that you deserve to be. I mean, there are thousands of expert trauma surgeons, general surgeons around the world. There's probably like a handful of surgeons that are, reasonably active on YouTube. And so I think there's an imposter syndrome feeling on top of that when you're sort of a doctor in social media, feeling like people may assume that you are ascribe things to you that you don't deserve or things like that.
It's almost like dealing with this strange or unusual level of micro celebrity, right? Just because of the fact that you have, right now your YouTube channel, you have 30,000 subscribers. On Instagram, you have around 10,000, 11,000 followers. Those, for lack of better terms, they're vanity metrics, but people see that and they think, oh, and he's a doctor, so this guy must be super legit in terms of his opinion and whatnot. And I imagine, again, as you're alluding to, that can sometimes feel a little overwhelming or just feeling like undeserved just because of some of the success that you've had on social media.
I think so. I think that kind of hits the nail on the head. And I don't typically get too far into the weeds for treatment or things that anyone could ever watch and think would be medical advice. And so I'm never really in a position where I could get over my skis and overextend myself. But exactly as you put it, I think that's always still dynamic.
Mm-hmm. In terms of the creation process for you, is there a target audience that you have in mind for the stuff that you're making? I imagine that from some of the stuff that you've made in the past, that there's probably quite a few aspiring med students, or they are in med school and they have questions about going to med school that they ask you about or ask you about your career. But do you have a specific target audience in mind for yourself when you're creating videos?
I do, and I think it's probably changed a little bit over over the past couple of years. But right now, where I am, I'd say that my target audience is folks who are either in medicine and have this kind of creative itch or interested in innovation, or the layperson who's interested in innovation and health from that perspective. And it's always nice to pick up folks that are sort of outside of those immediate circles, the immediate radius of your target audience. And so I'm always hoping that I can create a video that has some, typical general fascination or interest for people. But when I'm making a video, I'm really kind of thinking about what I would find interesting, and what someone who's in my shoes, who is deep in the world of medicine but very much yearns for creative storytelling, would want to be watching.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing this series. It seems like you're doing a series now on covering like the history of surgery. And I've seen a couple of those videos. I mean, the two-parter on Albert Einstein is very fascinating for me as somebody, again, who's not working in medicine, but just had no idea that, not to spoil it for anybody, but that Albert Einstein's brain was preserved and actually taken wrongfully from his family.
Yes.
That was very interesting to me. Again, I have links in the description of this podcast for anybody to check that out. I'm wondering though, for those kinds of videos, what is your approach to doing research for that? Because I imagine that there's probably, an endless amount of research digging and researching that you can do where, if you don't necessarily set a deadline for yourself, you may not stop going down the rabbit hole.
I still struggle with the last thing you said, with when to put an endpoint on it.
Yeah.
My process right now has been, I'll hear the little kernel of the story somewhere. Either someone will mention, hey, did you know, or I'll see something online. So, for example, right now I'm working on a story about someone who took out his own appendix without anesthesia because he was in an isolated part of the world and realized he had appendicitis and did not want to die. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of all I knew about it. So then I just start off by Googling, and I try to sort of flesh out the details of the story. And honestly, a lot of the decision making is the same thing you mentioned, in a series of different stopping points. So how deep do you go? Like, how much backstory do you give? How much background do you give? And usually I aim to have something that would sort of be wrapped up within a 5 to 10 minute video, because I'm not sure how long you can hold someone's attention longer, and I'm still getting better at sort of driving people to keep watching through a video. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, my basic process is to try to find like what the core story is and start adding some color with the details around it.
And then, as someone who does write and write well, how much of that is part of your creation process in terms of, say, scripting the videos? Are you writing like a verbatim script for yourself to follow in those kinds of videos, or do you kind of just create a general outline for yourself and then ad lib essentially once you start recording on camera just some of the main ideas and topics of the video?
I've experimented with both over the years, and what I'm doing now is kind of the reverse of ad-libbing on camera. So I essentially will have some ideas and like an outline for myself, and then I have an app on my Apple Watch that I think it's called Inbox. I can find it later and send it to you if you want. But whatever the app is, I can just touch my Apple Watch while I'm driving, and I'll have like a phrase in mind or something, and I'll sort of start just saying things out loud.
Oh, cool! It's like a note-taking app.
Yeah, it's like a note-taking app, and the key is that it transcribes. Yes. So it's just like what your phone does, but it's super lean and super quick. So you just touch it and talk, and then you click the thing on the watch, and you're off to the races, and you can forget what you're doing. And then like later, I'll come back to my computer and pull it all from the cloud. So by the time I have a script in writing, most of it is written down by how I speak out loud, because it's different for me when I'm writing something like that versus when I'm writing something that will be read by an audience. Mm-hmm. And I found, when I've tried sort of scripting something out just from writing, or those times where I don't think of all of it from my head, and can't extemporaneously just spit it all out, that when I write something down on the page, it has to go through like a couple different versions of me saying it out loud and changing the words, because it just doesn't sound the same. You don't speak the way you write. And, if you did, people would think you were a weirdo,
I know. I deal with that all the time myself. I mean, yeah, it's a challenge for me as someone who writes quite a bit, to try and I wish I could capture more of my speaking voice in my writing, but at the same time, I don't talk the way that I would write, and vice versa.
It's so tough.
It's just different.
Yeah. It's totally. And the other thing that leads me to do more writing and having more stuff prepared in advance is starting to go deeper into the science or the psychology, or just what makes a good story that people want to keep watching. So I really have started spending more time trying to craft a hook, or trying to unfold a story and sort of unravel a story in a way that makes someone want to keep going deeper into it, rather than you spill the beans up front, or you say something that just sounds boring to anyone other than you. And I find that writing that and sort of thinking and going back and forth between the page and my voice helps me get that better.
How much rewriting are you doing for that? I as someone who also writes myself, because I constantly am just like rewriting, revision. Even when I publish something, I always feel like, okay, I could have probably wrote that in a totally different way. So I'm curious on your end, how much time are you spending on say rewriting and revising your, essentially like your opening statement or opening hook for your videos?
A lot of time, but not. So I think most of the time it's kind of like a big traffic jam in my brain. I can sit down multiple times and not really get much out, and then finally, I'll get 85% of it out and into words on paper. So once I have something written down, I might change. I usually change it once-ish. Usually I refine it a little bit, but it takes me so long to get to that point, because I think it. I haven't cleared the traffic blocks in my brain when I'm trying to write. So the fact that I don't do as many rounds of revisions is because it still right now is taking me longer to kind of get it out up front.
Mm-hmm. And what else is very interesting to me, the way you describe your creative process is with your Apple Watch. It's almost like you're almost, it's not like you set aside a time where you say, okay, this hour I'm going to write the entire script to my YouTube video. I imagine there are just these aha moments throughout your day where, oh, hey, that idea for the Einstein video, I should note this down right now. So it's almost like you're creating in bits and pieces. And then probably, when it comes down to actually sitting down and filming the video, you aggregate all those notes and information and then piece it into one big script for yourself. Would that be a fair assessment to make?
Totally. I mean, I sometimes I still have to sit down and carve out time, which is tough for me to make myself do. And what you described is much more my overall style. There's this I have in the back of my head a handful of dream courses or dream things that I'd want to learn, and once I'm out of this fellowship year and I have more time again next year, once I'm fully in attending, I've been thinking about it, and there's this one course it's called Making a Second Brain or something like that.
Oh, Building a Second Brain by Tiago Forte.
Building a second, I haven't investigated it. I don't know if it's worth the money or the time, but the promise that I've read when I sort of read the ads about it is kind of like what I do right now, but better, so much better. It seems like it's a way to grab all sorts of scraps of ideas and bring it in through a funnel and really kind of leverage that to the maximum. And so right now I do little shreds of that type of thing, but someday I would love to learn how to really make that a slick, well-oiled
machine. Yeah. Have you ever read or heard of the book Getting Things Done by David Allen?
No, I've that title sounds familiar, but no, I'm going to write this down for myself right now, actually.
Yeah,
getting things done.
GTD. He actually had a really great interview a couple of years ago with Tim Ferriss on his podcast. And that's how I'd heard of GTD before, because I think a lot of people talk about it in the productivity space.
Okay.
And then when I heard him on that podcast, I was just so surprised that here is this guy who is, considered one of the renowned leaders in productivity, and his backstory and history was like he was a hippie in like the 1970s. That's what drew me in, because I said, if that guy ends up being one of the kings of productivity and has that kind of backstory, then there's hope for someone like me who I have some opportunities myself, to improve my productivity. But the reason I bring up GTD is because I actually subscribe to Tiago Forte's email list.
Oh, cool.
And the Second Brain course that he mentions, and we can link this in the show notes as well, because I think it could be useful for people who are creators. It seems like 2.0 version of GTD. It's very similar, like some of the core tenets, the ideas of having like a capturing device. David Allen, one of his biggest things is just you should carry around like a little notebook with you at all times and just write down stuff. But on top of that, having a system where you're processing those notes, even if you end up discarding them down the line, at least just being able to capture all the stuff that's going on in your head, writing it down, and then having some sort of system where you're processing that in an inbox, either discarding or then moving it into a next action to take or a project to take. I actually read that book finally at the end of last year, because I realized that this was something that I needed to do for myself. And I will say it has improved my ability to not necessarily multitask, but be more focused. But it's difficult. It is difficult. I wouldn't even say that in recent months I've been the best at it in terms of keeping that process in order. But it is a very valuable toolkit to have if you can develop it for yourself. So I checked out that book if I were you.
Yeah, I definitely will. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. No, and it's that brings me to, I guess, another change of subject here in regards to discussing the content creation process for you. But what does a typical workflow look like in general once you've gone and actually filmed the video? Now, how does the editing look like for you on that end?
Yeah, so that's in a little bit of transition right now. So up till my Einstein videos, I did everything 100% myself. Mm-hmm. And now I've started working with an editor to help me both process everything, and I can send him everything with all the takes, and he'll chop it down to sort of a smooth take, but also to help me building out some animation. So in the more recent Einstein video with the map and everything, and there are arrows drawn across the map, that's not something that I knew how to do. And before I started working with him, something like that, if I wanted to do it, I would pause and then watch all these tutorials and then learn how to do it very inefficiently.
Yeah.
Usually make some mistakes, and finally Frankenstein together something that sort of looked like what I had in mind. So working with an editor has been really helpful for that. And then typically what will happen is he'll post his cut of his first cut to a shared Dropbox, and I'll pull it in the final cut, and I'll sometimes swap out tracks. Something that I really like doing with music is having like the drop to a song, right before the beat comes in. Mm-hmm. Towards the end of my videos, like right when the video is done, before like the wrap up happens, because I think I got kind of hooked on seeing that with Nerdwriter videos back in the day.
Yeah.
And so sometimes he'll send me a video, and he has access to all of my sort of digital royalty-free music subscriptions. But I also have personally contacted zillions of artists over the years on SoundCloud, and, gotten individual permissions to and he doesn't, I haven't yet organized a system where he knows everyone that's said yes or no to me. So sometimes I'll then go in and grab a track from one of those other artists, like someone named Blue Wednesday, is
cool.
stuff. But Blue Wednesday, he's one of my favorite artists in the world, and he lets me use his, I usually license, we worked out a licensing fee per track, but he lets me use his tracks in my videos. So I'll usually swap in some music like that towards the end.
And with working with a video editor, with working with a freelance editor, how have you been able to teach yourself or adapt, I guess would be the better word, to letting go of creative control? I mean, I think what you mentioned there about your video editor also has the capability and capacity to do motion graphics. So that probably, when he's able to do that, it's probably, a huge sigh of relief for you, where you're thinking, oh, this is awesome. He can do something that I can do, and it's really spicing up the videos. But I know from, talking to many creators that is always the hang up for a lot of people, is having this sense or feeling like, oh, I can't give that up because they're not going to edit the video the way that, it's not going to be in my style. It's going to feel totally different, and nobody can actually capture my creativity the way that I do.
Yeah, it has been easier than I had expected. I think one reason why is that we have a great dynamic, and he's constantly suggesting that we jump on a Zoom call together to talk things out, and I can explain things out loud to him. And I always feel badly doing that. I feel like I'm taking up, I'm going to take up his time, and he doesn't bill for that time while we're talking. And I think that makes it easier. So he's not just sort of doing stuff or guessing wrong, and we have a great back and forth dynamic. That's number one. I think number two is that I really respect his talent and his skills. And so there's a little bit of, I sort of gave him a flavor of what I have in mind here, and I don't know what he'll come up with, but it will be in the realm of something that I was trying to describe. Like, I know he'll do something good. And then I think probably number three is that I am so used to being in a team from surgery and from healthcare that, like, in medicine, I think especially in academic medicine, where you have these sort of giants that like everyone else looks up to, you realize that like everyone is replaceable to a depressing degree. And once you sort of get past that, you realize that like there's nothing all that special about you at the core. Like, this sounds terrible. Like, there is. Everyone is special. Everyone has a unique voice. But like at the end of the day, someone can do the same things that you are doing. And if you want it done slightly differently, you can go back and tweak it. Especially for the types of videos that I'm doing right now, they're not the types of videos yet where, small little editorial decisions completely changes like the whole arc or the whole meaning or something, And I'd love to get into that space of creative storytelling. And, if I can get there, when I do, I still think, it'll be doable with an editor. The greatest that cinema has to offer is not shot by one person and edited by one person. It's, these massive teams and everything.
Yeah, I mean, this is a phase of evolution that we're seeing with YouTube and creators in general. I mean, to do YouTube really well, when you look at some of the really top tier YouTubers out there, yes, it's them solo, individual on screen, but there's no way they can do it solely by themselves to reach that level.
Yeah.
When you're somebody like a Mr. Beast or Marques Brownlee or Ali Abdaal, these YouTubers, Matt Diavella, they have teams behind them. And so I think that's part of the evolution of a YouTuber or a creator down the line, is deciding when it is time to actually hand off some of the work that could be enjoyable, but maybe it's a little tedious, because a lot of people do like editing. It's not to say that it's a pointless endeavor. There are quite a lot of people who really enjoy doing it, but at the same time, like, if it's gonna open up opportunities for yourself in other areas, of your YouTube channel, then why not outsource it?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, editing for me is like writing, or especially creative writing. It's always been this kind of thing that you sort of hate it while you're doing it, There are these brief moments of elation
I know what
during
you're
the
saying.
process, and like long moments of just sort of hating it. And then when you're done, it feels great, and somewhere in that, it's like a little bit addictive, or, it's net positive enough that you want to do it again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally can relate to wishing I didn't have to give up the editing. I can totally relate.
There's that dopamine hit after you actually watch the final product, or even, for example, if you write something, you read it, that whole period of suffering of like, gosh, I think I'm a terrible writer, or I'm not good on camera, and then you actually watch it or you read it, and you think to yourself, wow, this is not that bad. I'm not as bad as I think I am. And that's enough to give you, I guess, the courage or boost to move on to the next project. But the problem is once you move on to the next project, you go through that same like torturous, sometimes for some people, I mean, I feel like you and I can relate on that level where it feels a bit torturous at times when you're going through that creative process of trying to find clarity of what it is that you're trying to really say in whatever piece of content that you're making.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
Yeah. So David, as we, get closer to wrapping up this conversation, some of the things I want to ask you about are in relation to, I guess, like the future of your YouTube channel. As we started this conversation, I had asked you if it was fair to make the assessment or make the assumption that your YouTube channel right now is more or less a creative outlet for yourself, a way for you to explore your creativity. I've talked to many creators, obviously, on this podcast, both big and small, who are using their YouTube channel as a business launching platform for themselves. Is that something that you have in mind for yourself, or is it just a situation where as long as you're, continuing to enjoy the process of putting stuff out there, exploring what you're curious about, that's all that matters? Or again, is there something down the line that maybe you would want to turn this into a side business or even a bigger business in the future?
That's such a great question. The short answer is that for me, the sort of creative outlet piece of the channel is going to come first and foremost, even to the extent that I'm sure that will sort of change my ability to do the other stuff that you're talking about. I'm really lucky that I, found my way in life to being in a career where, like, if I won the lottery, so $1 billion dropped in my lap to do whatever I wouldn't want to stop being a surgeon and to stop operating and being with patients, because I feel like that's calling it a calling, I think, is kind of cliche and too much, but it's something that gives meaning to my life. And, certainly if I suddenly was a gazillionaire, I might dial back, and, my job itself might look different in terms of the hours and the details, but I wouldn't want to leave my work in medicine at this point in my career for any price. So that kind of keeps me comfortable being creative on YouTube and making that my creative outlet. I do believe that there will be some sort of professional opportunities or benefit to me in the video space. I think video is starting to be sort of appreciated and recognized, across industries as something that has actual value and isn't just, this trivial pursuit or this trivial piece of entertainment. Mm-hmm. You see that with this massive influencer industry and all of that. And so I'm starting to see little inklings in medicine of people who will sort of come to me and say, oh, I know you're good at video, or I know you do video. And I believe that even if it's not functioning as a business for me, creating content and continuing to work on my craft with video will eventually start to meld more with opportunities that I have in the traditional medicine space. And I don't even know what they are yet, but I believe that enough, and I enjoy what I'm doing on YouTube enough that it's okay with me that I can't see the end of that tunnel yet. And if there's an opportunity to craft this channel into something that is formalized more as a business, that could be interesting. I just don't think it would ever be interesting enough to me to sort of fundamentally shift the creative aspect of it.
Yeah, no, and that's great to hear because, it probably allows you to feel less pressure on yourself, to create, because I know from again talking to other creators and people who, this is their livelihood, then it becomes more of an obligation. And when you feel obligated to do some things at certain points, you lose the fun out of it. You lose the enjoyment out of it. So, I mean, more power to you. And you're very blessed and fortunate to be in a career, have a great day job that you actually enjoy, because that is something that most people struggle to find in their entire lives. And it's also a lucrative field for yourself as well that would allow you to have this as an outlet for yourself to express yourself creatively. So that's really cool. And I think a lot of times, you always hear it too from other creators who maybe just stumbled upon building a business for themselves out of a YouTube channel, or now these days out of a TikTok, is they just say, oh yeah, I was just messing around, I was just filming videos. And then now all of a sudden I was doing it consistently, and all of a sudden now I have 1 million subscribers and I can sell them this product that actually solves a problem that they have and I have, to them.
Yeah, totally.
Well, David, again, as we wrap this up, is there anything else that you would like to add, here as we close out this conversation? Any asks of the audience that you would like to make, or even just shouting out, obviously, where people can find you on the internet and on YouTube?
Sure. Well, to find me on YouTube, it's youtube.com/David Hindin, Hindin. And on Instagram, it's The Surgeon Life. And on Twitter, it's just David Hindin. And no real ask other than anyone who sort of resonates with what they've heard, or, enjoys my content. If they, would want to see something else or have other ideas for things they'd like, I'd love to hear it. But that's really it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me, David.
It's so great to talk to you.
Once again, thank you to my guest on this week's episode, Dr. David Hindin, for joining me on this episode of the Video Craft Show presented by Video Husky. Make sure to follow him on YouTube and on Instagram. We've got links to those places on our show notes at www.videocraftshow.com. Also, make sure to sign up to our email list. It's the best way to get up to date, or stay up to date, I should say, with all things Video Craft Show, and we will be sending out notifications as to when we are uploading and updating new episodes of the Video Craft Show on our email list. So again, make sure you subscribe to that. Also, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. Click the notification bell to alert you of whenever we release new content. And if you can, do us a favor, if you're enjoying the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever it is that you can rate and review podcasts, rate and review us. Leave us a review. We read all of them. We're always curious to hear from you. So make sure to leave a review for our podcast and give us feedback, because that's the way that we can improve this show. Want to thank my team for helping me to produce this episode. As always, my producer, Nikki Vicente, Ingrid Saraiba, our editor, as well as Paulo Lopez on graphics. And just a quick reminder for all of you, if you are looking to get videos edited to look just like this, then visit videohusky.com to learn more. I'll see you next week on another episode, another edition of the Video Craft Show presented by Video Husky.